All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us and welcome to Real Talk Office Hours Hunting for Silver Linings for this Monday, July 20, 2020. This is hosted today by myself, Corey Hart, and George Katsanos here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And we have a special guest. We have Alex from Urbana-Champaign, the 10th largest city outside of Chicago and 3 hours away, despite what most people think. Anyway, we were brought to you overall by Startup Grind, the world's largest startup community. We have 600 plus chapters in over 125 countries, and we operate with a mission to educate, inspire, and connect. We're driven by three values: make friends, not contacts, help others before you help yourself, and give before you take. Now, the pandemic has been and will continue to be a great global leveler. And as entrepreneurs, we do our very best for our businesses, teams, and families. And we should be informed, rational, analytical, and rigorous in our thinking. We should also learn to control our biases as they emerge in various circumstances. We do invite everyone to join us live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday as we track the intersection of facts, biases, and action through our review of global financial markets, alongside check-ins and real talk with Startup Grind chapter directors, entrepreneurs, and ecosystem stakeholders from across the world. We do this because no one has a crystal ball, but if we keep our eyes and ears open and pay attention, we may be able to see around the bend, and with some luck, spot the silver linings that are around every cloud. Now, if you do miss the live events, you can always view the recordings, as most do, at startupgrind.com/grand-rapids or on our YouTube channel, where you can also download the reading notes from the show. Now, before I introduce George for the Global Market Update, just a little bit of housekeeping. Comments made and views expressed by all participants in this podcast are not intended to invite or incite individuals, entrepreneurs, or investors to buy or sell financial assets, real assets, commodities, futures, and/or options. The purpose of this podcast is to educate and to inform, not to trade or to invest. If you feel compelled to trade and/or invest, please call your broker. And remember, however, risk is everywhere, even when you think that you're not taking a risk. Now, with all that, it is my pleasure to introduce everyone to George Katsanos to get us started with the catch-up of what the global markets are thinking and doing.
Hello, Corey. Hello, Alex. Welcome to Real Talk. Corey, when you say when the markets are thinking and doing, sometimes I find it incongruous, disconnected. The reality of fear and greed on the one hand, the two major forces that are driving the markets, and the reality of COVID-19. Global stop-go economies don't behave with rallies in the equities markets. But let's take things with a pinch of salt. Let's start, as we normally do, with currencies. We have said that when our entrepreneurs and our investors look at the world around them, should try to insulate themselves from political noise and obfuscation. You correctly said, Corey, that if you read the newspapers, you're misinformed. And if you don't read them, you're uninformed. So we turn to the financial markets every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for signals to see what they're telling us and what our ecosystem can learn from these signals so that they can make better decisions. As we have always said, the equities market are one of a number of markets, perhaps not the most important, although for obvious reasons, the press, generally defined, focuses on equities. We take a different view. We start with currencies because we see that over the years, the currencies are the first market that feels the pressure of global decision-making. We've seen that in the middle of the crisis, on March 23rd, the dollar hit 1.05, 106 against the euro. And as we are moving slowly to a world that is less unpredictable, or so the markets think, the risk on trades are essentially taking place, which means investors are slowly going away from the dollar that acted as a safe haven and are beginning to invest in a host of other currencies, what we call the crosses, like the euro, the yen, sterling, the Aussie dollar, the Swiss franc, and so on and so forth. So compared to Friday's close, we don't have that much of a change. It seems that the markets are trying to digest a busy week ahead of us. And let's be very clear about it. This coming week does not have any major economic news, but it does have a lot of earnings announcements. With this, let me start by mentioning that today, Cadence Design Systems, Halliburton, IBM, Philips, and Zynos Bancorp are reporting the results. You may have heard that Devon Energy picked up Noble for $5 billion in stock. That is an interesting decision after Warren Buffett bought an energy company himself. Um, the currency markets don't seem to take any view of this development, but we'll see what is going on in the energy sector in a moment. So going back to our earnings announcements, on Tuesday, we have Capital One, Coca-Cola, Intuitive Surgical, Lockheed Martin, Novartis, Philip Morris, Prologis, Texas Instruments, and United Airlines reporting. Also on Tuesday, Charles Schwab holds its virtual summer business update. It will be interesting to see what Charles Schwab will discuss. On Tuesday, the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago reports its National Activity Index for June. So we'll get a view of what is happening in the Chicago area. On Thursday, American Airlines, AT&T, Danaher, Dow, Equifax, Intel, Kimberly-Clark, Nucor, Green Realty, Southwest Airlines, Twitter, and Union Pacific will be reporting. On Friday, American Express, Honeywell, Next Era Energy, Schlumberger, Verizon Communications are going to be among the reporting companies. So we have banks, we have energies, we have airlines, we have some medical companies. And I forgot that on Wednesday, we have Baker Hughes, Biogen, Chipotle, CSX, HCA Healthcare, Microsoft, and Tesla. So quite a busy schedule. The bond market seems to be, again, looking at all the world events around it and saying, oh, okay, let's remain cautious. Since the crisis back in February, the bond market has remained very conservative. Investors in the 10-year space across the world have remained relatively supportive of the markets. Whether you look at Asia, whether you look at Europe or the Americas, the 10-year yields have remained very stable to the lower end of the spectrum. Just to give you an idea, among the high yielders in Asia, South Korea is at 1.3, India 5.8, Australia anchored in 0.8, New Zealand 0.8, and Japan at 0. The high yielders in Europe, Greece, and Italy are doing exceptionally well. Italy is trading close to 1%. Who would have ever thought? And Switzerland at minus 0.5, together with Germany at the under end of the spectrum. Here in the US, our 10-year bond is trading at the lower end of the trading range at 0.6%. Mexico comfortably under 6%. Brazil 6.6, and Canada 0.5. The bond markets are telling us, be cautious. On the commodity front, what we have seen is that oil is taking a kind of a breather, trading under $40 a barrel. That is the West Texas Intermediate. Brent, on the other hand, is trading at $42. Again, huge supply considerations. Surprising that the market is not lower. We'll see what happens after the summer season ends. Natural gas subsided from close to 185, 188, as we saw it earlier on in July, down to 1.6. Clearly, the cooler front, the rains, have reduced the demand for natural gas for the time being. Citibank had a report on gold saying it's only a matter of time before gold hits new highs, 18, 17, and going. Fear of debasement and fear of inflation, debasing of the currencies, that is, and inflation are what are driving investors to gold. Whether they're right or not, we will see. However, there are some voices that are suggesting that this stop-go economy may result in some kind of, later on, inflationary pressures with low growth environment. So a kind of the 70s, stagflation. We should all bear this in mind as we're looking into the future to make decisions about where to invest, how to invest, with whom to be partners, and how to look at our strategic partnerships and alliances. On the industrial front, copper has jumped very nicely, thank you, back close to $300 per pound. Copper is a very good indication of industrial growth around the world, and particularly Chinese manufacturing. The grains, for those of us who live close to the prairie, the Great Prairie, the Great Lakes areas, the grains are very important, a source of vitality, energy, and also employment. With the political tit for tat, the grains have suffered quite a bit. Mother Nature has given us wonderful crops, a wonderful season so far, no major calamities, no delays in the growth. So this crop is going to be significant across grains, corn, wheat, and soybeans. If the relations with China were only a bit better, then we could have seen a stronger price environment. However, for the time being, the grains will remain sold. Looking at the equities market around the world, you can see that Asia, with the exception of China and Korea, did very well today, starting a new week on a positive front. The idea is that the liquidity in the system emanating from the US, Europe, and Japan will flow over to the emerging markets, and they will benefit from this liquidity. We see green all around the globe in Europe. Europe has reached milestone agreements over the weekend about the $750 billion, 750 billion euros to be allocated as credit and grants from center to the periphery. Europe is parting, but as we have always said, it is worthwhile being contrarian. Hold on to your lederhosen. It's going to get bumpy. Back to you, Corey. Thank you.
Thanks for that, George. It's, this next couple of weeks is going to be pretty interesting with stuff coming out of the U.S. government and how they're going to support and to what level, as well as Europe as well. Doing the big road show over there, trying to see who's going to come forward with what and who needs what and who's going to support what. So it's going to be a fun rest of July, right?
Oh, and to make matters even more complicated, you're beginning to hear voices in France and in Germany suggesting that it is acceptable by government to take equity stakes in companies. So more zombies to come and more political innuendos.
Sure, and a little bit of unrest. We see Bulgaria and obviously France and here in the U.S. as well, all over the world. South Africa, very interesting times as the summer drags on.
As we have discussed, Corey, with all our participants, the challenge of economic dislocation and fear of outcomes in low job environments, in high unemployment environments, in high inequality environments, are suggesting that we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And with a vaccine or without a vaccine, the issues that we will be confronting as investors, as entrepreneurs, but also as members of our society are far too complex.
Yeah, exactly right, and that's why we do this, is to help out the individual and investor entrepreneur to really understand that no matter how small your town is, you are affected by what happens on the other side of the planet. It's just a matter of time before that ripple comes and hits you. So with that, thanks, George, for that comprehensive update today. I want to get into introducing our special guest. We have Alex here from Urbana-Champaign, Illinois. Welcome to the show. Thanks so much for participating with us today.
Thank you very much, Corey and George, for having me.
And we're really excited to hear a little bit about what's going on in your region. Real quick, how long have you lived in the area?
So interesting question. I originally moved to Urbana-Champaign when I was like 4 or 5 or something. Lived there through high school. After high school, between high school and undergrad, I kind of traveled around, did interesting things. I trained sled dogs up in Alaska. I rehabilitated penguins and rescued the occasional lion from poachers in South Africa. And then I came back to Urbana-Champaign, did my undergrad at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And then in 2016, I moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico to get my master's in engineering, and moved back to Urbana-Champaign August of last year.
Well, with that lifelong having those touch points as you've been moving back and forth, it's real. There's a love affair, of course, with the region. Almost the birth of the internet as we know it, right? And then all of the follow-on investment and activity from Mr. Andreessen, subsequent to doing such things. So, obviously there's a spotlight on the region. It is counted among one of the 50 most innovative regions in the U.S. So excited to learn more about how things look on the ground level today, especially as we are pushing through summer through this the first summer of this pandemic. So, but before we get into that, maybe a little bit more about your background. Clearly, it sounds like you have a nice diverse background that lends itself greatly to being a really excellent coach and mentor, right? Especially being able to see what things are like in very different ecosystems like South Africa. So maybe, a little bit more about your background, why it is that you enjoy what you do, your LinkedIn, you're the founder of organization. You're plugged in with entrepreneurship at so many different levels. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, so I've done a lot in my life. Like I said, when I was younger, right after high school, I essentially traveled around, lived in a lot of tents, worked with a lot of animals. Throughout that time, I really realized that there needed to be, in the broadest sense, accessible diagnostics and testing. Particularly for the defense, ag, medical, and law enforcement industries. I had realized that we had reached a point in our scientific capability where, we started looking for, I'm going to keep my hand down so it doesn't get cut off, where we had reached, things were good enough, right? And we just as industries, kept going for, faster, more precise, more testing, able to be multiplex, et cetera, which is great. As a scientist, I love that. I love more and more precise, better tests in the broadest sense. But we had reached a point where we could make testing accessible. We could make tests that were cheaper, faster, smaller, easier to use, just simple, to really get science, again, in the broadest sense, in the hands of the people who could use it. So I started working on what was essentially a solar-powered lab in a box, mainly targeting the, defense, ag, soil testing, as well as the medical community for, Doctors Without Borders type organizations. And I spent more years of my life and over the cost of my current house, developing something. It was very cool. It was a 35-pound solar-powered Pelican case. It could run all these different tests, from gel electrophoresis, polymerase chain reaction, blah, 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 blah. And I'm listing out all these things that, even saying them, I'm bored already. And I'm sure you guys are bored hearing them. And I'm sure that all the listeners are bored. And that's my point. I didn't go talk to my customers. I didn't realize that people did not want a 35-pound solar-powered Pelican case that could do X, Y, Z, and all this other cool crap. What I needed to do was go talk to my customers, because as soon as I did, I realized they didn't want great big labs and boxes. They wanted really, really simple, small little things that could just do one test, do it well, do it cheaply, and get actionable insights. That was the other thing I learned through customer discovery.
Alex, can I interrupt you for a second with a quick question here?
Absolutely.
Your customers were, I assume, not necessarily in the emerging markets, the third world, or Africa. They were low income, generally speaking?
Generally, yeah.
And did you ever have the opportunity to speak with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or any other of these high-focused and highly energized NGOs?
So I applied for one of the grand challenges quite some time ago, 6 or 7 years ago. I hadn't done enough customer discovery to understand what the customers needed. At the time, I was still all about, great big portable lab that can do anything. I hadn't realized what they needed yet. So I went through a National Science Foundation I-Corps, which, if anyone in the audience or y'all is not aware, basically the National Science Foundation, they provide support for customer discovery. And I say customer, what I really mean is stakeholder, talking to users, beneficiaries, decision makers, buyers, influencers, saboteurs, talking to all these people to really understand the competitive landscape. It's something that is just unique, and it is a totally amazing program. There are site I-Corps spread throughout the US. There's like 4 or 5 here in Illinois alone. Every state has a site I-Corps. If you want to run a tech-based business, see if you're eligible to join your nearest I-Corps site. It is phenomenal training. I eventually taught I-Corps myself down at New Mexico State, and I currently teach it here at UIUC. And it's really just all about understanding the customer. So as an engineer and as an entrepreneur, I've now changed completely my business model. You know, whether it's my own entrepreneurship, my own invention, or something that somebody hires me to build as a contract engineer, I don't even start the fun, nerdy engineering part or the fun, nerdy business planning part until I've talked to at least 50 customers, because I don't understand their workflows sufficiently to build something that's going to be of value to them. That is one big change that I see with the pandemic. You know, of course, there are horrible consequences, but customer discovery has never been easier. I mean, people have a lot more free time. You know, they're able to, you know, get on a Zoom call, get on a Google Meets call, you know, whatever someone's video conference provider of choice is, and talk about their problems. And
it's also never been more important, right?
Absolutely. It's never been more important. I mean,
so many businesses are like, who are my customers anymore?
Yeah. Well, so entrepreneurs and business in general, right? But particularly entrepreneurs, they've always had to be scrappy. And I think this pandemic is just enforcing these things that entrepreneurs already had to be.
Yeah, it's pulling the veil back, right? And a lot of times, the optics of success are only a thumbnail scratch away. And the pandemic is like, oh, hey, look at that. You only have 4 weeks of cash. Like, what's up with that? Have you not planned? So, all right. So yeah, so you're in the process of doing all that. And then how did you get plugged into the overall ecosystem there? Because it seems like you're a very active participant on different levels.
Mm-hmm. Here in Urbana-Champaign?
Yes.
Yeah. So we have a really fantastic university-affiliated incubator here, Enterprise Works. And one day I just walked into one of the higher-ups' office and said, "Hey, y'all looking for any, mentorship or, training for some of your startups?" As an engineer, I've built 200 products. I've built a lot of companies and, had exits through licensing. And they were really looking for, so we have probably 10 or 15 or so entrepreneurs in residence here, myself included. And, there's some attorneys, there's some accountants, there's, all kinds of people with all this business experience who are absolutely phenomenal. I have never seen so much talent in an advisor network, especially for a town this size, and especially for an advisor network of only 10 to 15 people. But
Sure.
They really needed someone who is of the, just roll your shirt sleeves up and just, build some stuff. Because
Right.
that I've found is one of the biggest struggles that entrepreneurs face. Of course, there are struggles with, customer discovery and business development, but just building, like product 0 to 1, just building something that you can show stakeholders, that you can get feedback on, that you can iterate and pivot as needed, and to build it in the leanest, customer-focused, most innovative way. Startups
the barrier to entry on that is pretty high, just because it really it leans on network, and if you don't have access to the right kind of type of firm or person, you can spend a lot of money and waste a lot of time. Especially there are a lot of firms and agencies that are happy to help do stuff like that, except that they're not so concerned about the customer as they are your pocketbook, right? So they'll bleed through your investment money before they start to wonder, or even care if you're going to sell any of it. That's too bad that's the case. But
no, absolutely. And to that point, as a contract engineer, because so here at Enterprise Works, someone will meet with me, and Enterprise Works just pays my fee completely. Now, I can't do bench work, which is, a big limitation, but it's what it is. So if someone hires me as a contract engineer to build something for them, or, to assist with the building of something, I keep my prices always under $15K for the initial contract. always. There are a couple for some of my, division level, organization level, big corporate entity customers, hospital systems, et cetera, who've, they've got the pocketbook to make it work. Under them, I'll go a bit higher depending on the project, of course. But for this entrepreneur starting out, I always keep it under 15K because it's relatively easy to get a small business assistance loan for that amount.
Right.
If I go higher, even 16,000, it's just going to be a lot harder for them to get the money. And, as an engineer, I want them to succeed. And frankly, I want money coming in. So I remove to do it. And it ends up helping both parties.
Yeah, you can get it on the back end. And as you said, that non-dilutive funding, which is so incredibly important and a great resource that a lot of entrepreneurs don't really understand or investigate too much of. But yeah, that 15K is that sweet spot.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
we have Michigan State University it manages a fund for the state of Michigan, and they'll help out up to 50K, they say. But yeah, like if you want to get that thumbs up, and that approval, especially nice and quickly, you gotta make it, because they want to do more deals, right?
Yeah.
Like more innovation coming through, the more deals, the more businesses, the better the state does, the region does. Anyway, so yeah, and then you found Startup Grind like a little bit last year, or did you know about the organization previously?
Yeah. So when I was living in Las Cruces, a friend of mine, Ivan Huerta, who runs the El Paso chapter, I noticed that he started one, and hey, that's pretty cool. Let me look into that. And at the time, my wife and I were looking to move to Arkansas. It's where she's from. And so we had briefly moved up there. We were going to launch a chapter in the Northwest Arkansas, Fayetteville area. Very, very active startup community. And, a lot of the startups there, it was more supply chain, logistics type, of course, Walmart is headquartered there, Tyson, JB Hunt, all these huge players, and all the startups there, they want to either work with, or be bought by those companies. And that is fantastic, right? Any startup that can find an opportunity wins. That's fantastic. But as an engineer, I'm more of a hardware, sensor, robotics, like, fun things that I can, build or interact with my hands. That's more my scene. So I ended up not launching the Fayetteville, Northwest Arkansas chapter, and ended up moving back here to Urbana-Champaign because they had launched a new engineering-focused medical school. So as part of the students' curriculum there at the medical school, they have to build something.
Oh, very cool.
A startup, it is amazing. And the guys who run the medical school, I mean, I just got an email update that one of them, his like third or fourth company or something, just got some big investment. So it's very, entrepreneurship focused, which I think is good. I think more organizations, more schools, more just anything, any kind of entity needs to be more entrepreneurship focused because that's where innovation happens.
Yeah, the innovation, because these people are on the front lines, right? Like
absolutely,
all day, every day, they're the ones who know the customers. To your earlier point, that's really great. I'm familiar with that area of Arkansas. My family, half my family's from like the Fort Smith area.
It is beautiful.
And so I actually just did a nice little road trip from California back up to Michigan and went through the Ozarks and whatnot, spent some time on some rivers, so anyway, but yeah, pre-COVID, or pre-pandemic, we have these regions like that particular region you mentioned, like, yeah, we start something up, we want to be acquired. Like that's our model. That's how things are done. But now post-pandemic, or mid-pandemic, the opportunity for global innovation and global access to global resources, funding, and other exits is now more open to everyone. And we're seeing a lot of collaboration between regions and continents as well as we do this roadshow, and we expect that just to continue. And that's part of what we're trying to also do here is find these silver linings in the different areas and regions, so that maybe investors from one can say, oh, you know what, this is a sector that we have a lot of expertise in. As long as it's safe to do investments over there, let's do it. Let's get our hands dirty, right? So anyway, yeah. So you started the chapter for Startup Grind there in Illinois, and you've been plugged into the ecosystem. Uh, can you speak a little bit about we've heard a little about the sectors that you have expertise in, but what are the overall like sectors of the area?
Yeah, so ag is, as one could imagine, pretty darn good. I mean, the little town that I'm in is surrounded by miles and miles and miles of cornfield, which is boring to look at. Not the prettiest sight, but a lot of value and a whole lot of innovation around ag here. We just launched an ag tech accelerator in the last 2 or 3 months or so. Really, really exciting. Cargill just opened a new innovation lab here. We've got John Deere Innovation Lab. So a lot of ag. What's really interesting is that I've seen shifts into areas where Urbana-Champaign has struggled a bit. There have been successful biomedical companies here. One of them worked with directly as a contract engineer. There have been successful biomedical companies here, but not quite as much as say ag. But what's really interesting is a lot of the ag expertise is being leveraged. So there's a company here called EarthSense. They make pretty darn cool robots, and these are phenotyping robots. So essentially, they go between the rows of corn, and they have all these cameras, and they look at the corn, and they use all this fancy math to basically measure like how's it looking, is it growing well, what needs to be done. Super neat. They very recently, in the last month, I think, just got an award, a SIBR award from the NSF to change that robot into a UV sterilizing robot for COVID stuff. And the immediate names don't come to mind, but there's 2 or 3 other companies that were not, a couple of them were biomedical, but they really weren't targeted towards COVID. But with this new pandemic and the new opportunities that are associated, they've really been able to pivot, because at the end of the day, innovation is innovation. Mm-hmm. It's a skill set that you can apply, regardless of the setting you're in or the industry you're targeting.
Especially if we're thinking about things like process, what may work here is applicable in so many different ways. You just got to open your mind and see it, right? Or others can see it for you. And then you have to be like, oh, okay, I'm okay with that. It's even though this is my dream or whatever. Yeah. And so your region being so influential and having so many rock stars come from the area, is there a lot of people coming back to the well, saying, hey, I was born from this area. Now I've gone to the coast or whatever. I've had my success. I'm going to go back and just pay it forward, pay it back. Is there a lot of that happening with capital as well as ideas?
Ideas, yes. People, yes. Capital, yes and no. Yes and no. Of course, capital will continue to target the coasts. Silicon Valley, all about software. Software is highly scalable, and if it's worth a darn, and a software crew, does good customer discovery and knows what their customers want, it's some of the best investments there is. Mm-hmm. They just know what they're doing. But I have seen here in the Midwest, in the grain belt, seen a really big resurgence in hardware, generally across the board industry. And, like you said, talent coming back.
Yeah. So about talent in particular, so that's one great part of any ecosystem is having, an ample amount of talent. Is there a lot of, do they hang around for university? They get plugged into a firm and then they leave? Is it just this constant churn? Or do you have a nice little hotbed of folks sticking around that just love the area? And
we do, yeah. We definitely do have folks there. Of course, in any university, right? There's going to be brain drain, but I'm plugged into a lot of different entrepreneurial ecosystems throughout the U.S. from, California, New Mexico to, DC and Maine. I mean, I very literally across the U.S. What I have seen is that here in Champaign-Urbana, Urbana-Champaign, it combines a few fundamental things. Ridiculously low housing rates in comparison to, the coasts and, Boston and, the big areas, Chicago too, right? I've also seen just a huge amount of just sheer amazing entrepreneurial talent. Of course, a fair amount of our entrepreneurs are related to the university, professors there, just studied there or whatever. But, just the amount of entrepreneurial talent is amazing. So one of our programs here at UIUC, it's called iVenture. It is, so we have pitch competitions here, we've got a couple other things. And I've seen a similar model with iVenture where essentially the school finds some, really innovative students. I think this year there's a cohort of 14 or 15 teams. And essentially they pay them to work on their business over the summer. They get a 10K stipend, they get, excuse me, they get, access to, mentors like me, facilities, like just advising, all kinds of stuff. They've been running that program. Don't quote me, I'm like 60% sure on this, but they've been running the program for probably 6 years-ish, 5 years, not a huge amount of time. And they usually have 10 to 15-ish teams per cohort. Just that relatively small amount of people, of students that have gone through, and recognizing, again, these are student entrepreneurs. They've raised like 8 million, some huge amount as teams, for their various ventures. Of course, students. So some projects will fragment. Some will join others' projects. After the close of the cohort. But just even that tiny little microcosm for a town of Champaign-Urbana's relative size and income level is pretty astounding in my mind.
So some of this talent is it's naturally homegrown. Is it part of this ethos or mindset of the region after being such a hotbed of innovation for so long?
It is, yeah. So here at the university, we have our Technology Entrepreneurship Center, which offers 20 or 30 or so classes all across the board of entrepreneurship. In the fall, I will be teaching Technology Entrepreneurship 401, which is for students after they go through our 201 class, which is where they kind of develop and curate a business model. And then 401, we have students really put, proverbial meat on the bones of a startup. Whether that looks like, a really great understanding of the customer's workflow diagram, both pre and after their potential solution is inserted, to, prototype or MVP, or whatever. Students get credit for this. We also have courses taught in like fundraising and venture capital by an experienced VC and good friend out of St. Louis. I mean, there's just the Technology Entrepreneurship Center here. It absolutely supports entrepreneurship and innovation amongst their students.
So if there's someone in a middle school program who's somewhat bright or loves or just sees a lot of success stories, there's a pretty clear path to entrepreneurship or discovery for them. Just kind of it's not like a mystery. It's not like they'd live their entire lives and be like, oh, I had no idea that this was available to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here at the U of I, there's just it's astounding. I mean,
and then go for it. Finish, yeah.
Oh, what I was going to say was just, these were things that in undergrad I was a terrible student. And I just didn't really pay attention to what surrounded me on campus. And I wish I had known about all this stuff on campus here.
Yeah, I think so. I went to MSU for some time, and that's a large campus with a lot of different schools, a lot of stuff going on, and it was the same way. Like I switched my majors quite a bit, so I got a better view that way. But man, I had my blinders on. I was like head down. Um, so where you landed as far as being teaching a couple of these courses, and then also mentioning that you were kind of blind to a lot of the resources available to you when you were on campus at universities. How do you personally refrain from trying to just fill these young minds with everything at once? Like, because it seems like you're extremely excited to share your knowledge, which is a great quality. But how do you how do you keep the dam from just being like, here you go, you need to know it all right now. This is so exciting. What can I help you with?
Yeah, that is a struggle. Because like I wish that I could just, like the Matrix, right? Where, Keanu Reeves' character gets, a keto or whatever downloaded.
Right, yeah.
Or
I want to
uploaded.
fly a helicopter.
Yeah, I wish I could do that. That would be wonderful. But it's really about focus. Honestly, unless someone specifically asks me, and the biggest example I can think of is two things. First, should I be an LLC or a C Corp? Which for basically any startup is not a good question. It's not like LLC, unless an investor has a written contract that says, I will invest in you when you're a C Corp. That's literally the only reason to be a C Corp. Particularly for like a student startup, who just doesn't have the time or particularly the money to
you can always switch it up later.
Absolutely. That's one thing where, frankly, I don't want to bring that up with these students or even these, community entrepreneurs who just, haven't learned yet, enough about their customers. The other thing is equity vesting. I don't want to talk to people about equity vesting, but they ask me about it, and it's clear that they need the knowledge. Otherwise, they'll just go, oh, there's 5 of us, 20% each. Like, just horrible,
there it goes.
horrible mistakes that, that I learned what not to do because I made a bunch of mistakes over the years. That's the biggest thing is just focusing, for a lot of young entrepreneurs, right? What they really need to understand more than anything else is their customer. Mm-hmm. Their customer. I tell my students all the time, the customer does not care about your business. No one cares. Like, and the problem that I find is a lot of entrepreneurs, they fall in love and they get really excited with their tech. Mm-hmm. Speaking from experience, that's what I did. Like I said, I spent years of my life and more than the cost of my current house building, a great big lab that turns out nobody wanted. I mean, plenty of people thought it was really cool, but, being really cool doesn't, pay my rent or, et cetera. So, just focusing entrepreneurs and getting them to realize that it is the problem that's so important, not the solution. And then all the other stuff, the exact business questions, the exact technical questions, those come later. But, also what I've really learned is most of my role as, as a mentor or an EIR, whatever like role that someone's approaching me as, honestly, most of entrepreneurship it's common sense. Of course there are technical questions, oh, how should I, write this JSON object to, whatever, like go to this other, part of the network, or, what kind of corporate formation should I be filing, which, as we've talked about, is a darn easy question for most people, but still, those are technical questions, right? Unless you specifically know that knowledge, you just can't have the answer. But most questions that I get from entrepreneurs, they're actually pretty common sense, and at the end of the day, like I keep harping on, understand your customer.
Yeah.
Build out your tech in the leanest, most customer-focused, most innovative way possible, and then go forward. Now, my role as a mentor, or whatever it is, like I said, is just to sort of get the entrepreneur to have a like out of business experience, so to speak. They can step outside themselves and realize that, that basic entrepreneurial theory and really just basic common sense needs to apply. Oh wait, I should, not spend the money on that right now. That's not what's important. Just helping them kind of using the Socratic method of entrepreneurship, so to speak.
Yeah, that's just asking a lot of questions, and like you said, focus is pretty important as well. On the knowing the customer, it's like also you don't have to solve every problem. They've got a lot. Your customer probably has a lot of problems. You don't have to be the answer to all of them. So as far as like access to funding, is there like a large angel network? I saw like a list of quite a few angel groups in the area.
There is, yeah. Again, surprisingly for a town this size, there is. There's First Leaf Capital, there's Sarah Ventures, there's Illinois Ventures. There's quite a few more that I don't remember the name of. But yeah, there's quite a bit here. In particular, Illinois Ventures, they have an office out of Enterprise Works Incubator here. They have been phenomenal to a lot of the companies that I work with. There's a company here, for example, they're making curb ramp compliance for cities, in compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. They're making it just more streamlined, simpler, easier, cheaper, just really, really phenomenal stuff. Finding the workflow and just cutting out the crap that's just costing too much time and money. And in that particular case, making a difference in people's lives, right? Like sidewalks are public good, they're public trust. They should be accessible to ADA guidelines, but sadly a lot aren't, just because the old process just took too long. That particular company, for example, they received either a SAFE or they received a relatively small, bit from Illinois Ventures. But what they were able to do with that, because of course at any large university, there's all kinds of, entrepreneurial competitions. There's our COSAC competition here, which it awards like in total 300,000 or some crazy amount of money through all sorts of various little prizes. It might even be up to 500K. I don't know. It's a lot.
Sure.
But what Illinois Ventures was able to do, what was so enabling to this company, Deep Walk Research, was that they were able to show, hey, we didn't just win prize money. I think they did win some prize money at COSAC or something over the years. But they were able to show, hey, someone invested in our success. Someone thought that we were a good investment rather than just, we were interesting and fun to talk and had good, good optics to be invested in. And I think at a lot of university level entrepreneurial ecosystems, I think that in many ways needs to be emphasized more than just straight prize competitions. Because me, as an entrepreneur who's seen so many teams, I've worked with thousands of startups over the years. If I see someone literally bet their money that has the purpose of making more money on a team, it's worth like 10 or 20 times just, free prize money in competition.
Right. Yeah. That's some good insight right there, especially when you're looking for those silver lining, for those winners. I know that we have just a couple minutes left. So I told you before we hit record that we ask everybody, all the chapter directors, what can the global network of chapter directors here at Startup Grind do for you? How can we benefit you or your ecosystem? As we're midsummer here through the pandemic.
Okay. Yeah, I know you told me that you were going to ask that, and I'm still not prepared. But no, that is a great question. I've been thinking about it throughout this interview, and I think that we really need more globalization in the broadest sense as a community. I mean, you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said everyone is becoming more decentralized and global, and I think it's the greatest change for entrepreneurship that I've seen in my life. It is phenomenal. But here we need that, and seeing, some of the ways in which I talked about, we're applying some of the processes that were so good, like with ag, like with that EarthSense robotics company that I mentioned, that's pivoting to COVID. I think we need more opportunities to understand, opportunities like that. More collisions. More just hearing about other problems, other attitudes, other processes, and just kind of learning together, both in the individual like micro level, but also the macro level, just as a broader startup grind, and heck, even just entrepreneurial ecosystem across the world. I mean, that's what everyone needs, and that's what we need here in Urbana-Champaign.
I think that's it's on the roadmap for Startup Grind Global. We have pivoted, from the in-person events to all online, and now we have the membership program, and we have a startup program that we're plugging in people with investment and resources, mentorship, et cetera, and that's just going to grow. We'll be forwarding an email to you every now and then saying, hey, just checking in there, Alex, how's things going?
Awesome.
A couple like thumbs up, like I'm feeling this way kind of thing. And then we're going to try to put together that compared to, what everyone else is talking about. And then hopefully start to make some connections, to your point. So we just want to thank you so much for your time. It's very generous of you to give that to us, your insight, and best wishes, my friend. So glad to make your acquaintance today.
Awesome. It was great to meet you. And quick note, I love Michigan. You guys have one of the most advanced beer scenes in the world. To my reckoning, I mean, Founders, Bell's, totally amazing. Blows some really big breweries out of the water.
Yeah, I was in Southern California for the last like 10 years. And so that's some pretty good beer down there. We have, the Ballast Point, the big $1 billion, in Chicago bought that, right? So anyway, yeah, you're right. I've been swimming in beer. So I'll let you go. Have the rest of your day back. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a good day.